Becoming a high-performance software team. Atlassian has been working with software teams for about 12 years, and they have found 3 key strategies that are used by high-performing software teams. Now, these teams apply all or a combination of these techniques to deliver quality software fast. Number 1, they embrace change. 2, they cultivate collaboration. 3, they balance autonomy and visibility. Now, while it's easy to put topics like this on a slide in a presentation, I'm sure everyone in this room realizes the enormity of these types of initiatives in a business. So that's why we're going to drill down into each one of these. All right, strategy 1 is embrace change. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that high-performing teams are deeply agile, and they aren't afraid to make changes if it is going to optimize them for success. For example, when a new technology or a way of working emerges, if it emerges as a proven boost to productivity, then the team implements it or they try it out. They're constantly also seeking customer feedback. And when they receive contrarian feedback to what they're doing, then they change plans. So understanding the customer is really critical for software development teams to deliver that value, to their end users. And the best teams adopt practices and processes to constantly and consistently seek out their customers' feedback. So I have some examples here on this slide as to how they do that. And on the right, we have interviews. So regular customer interviews are really an effective method to gather customer feedback. These can be face-to-face, they can be remote, or they can be online. But the bottom line is they gather feedback and they incorporate that into their development. Another key item is measurement. And there's several ways you can measure and gather information from customers. Number 1 is Net Promoter Score. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Net Promoter Score, but it is a measurement that measures the loyalty that exists between a provider and a consumer. So how likely is it, that your customer will recommend your company, product, or service to a friend or colleague. So we get that information and then we score it based on a scale that's usually 0 to 10. So surveying your customers, systematically with something like NPS allows teams to benchmark themselves against industry peers. And this is going to give them, that high-level insight through a quantified score, while gathering insights through qualitative comments. So this is a great way to gather feedback. If you're not using NPS, I highly recommend adopting it. Another way to measure feedback is through growth hacking. And so that is actually, modifying your product to gather insights from your customers as they use the product. So you can see, are people discovering your feature? Are they using it? Do they find it interesting? Things of that nature. So that is another great way to measure feedback from customers. Lastly, we see that developers on high-performing teams spend time on product support. So for example, sending a developer to join the support team helps them feel the pain of the customer, from all of the bugs or the poorly implemented features. It helps those developers become way more customer focused when they develop new items in the future. So high-performing teams are constantly rebalancing their business goals with these insights from customers. Next up is the ability to quickly adopt new technologies and really increase your momentum. So high-performing teams, they aren't afraid to try out a new technology if it's going to increase their productivity. I have some examples here on this slide of ways that we have seen high-performing teams do this. And number one to talk about is, of course, Git and branching. So many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Git, and it's sort of been taking over the industry for version control. And development teams are really able to accelerate their work through Git's impact, on the fundamentals of software development on things like branching. So using Git helps you implement strategies that accelerate development. For example, the Atlassian teams, they use a feature branching workflow so that the developers can work independently on their feature development, while others can be confident to continue, to push their own features and bug fixes directly to customers. And then once work is complete, they can merge all of those changes together fast and easy. So the teams that are the quickest to adopt Git are the teams that, have increased their momentum the most. Next is deployment. So new technologies are, helping high-performing dev teams adopt new, better ways to deploy software. Some examples of technologies like this are Chef or Puppet, and they can be used to automate the deployment process. Also, new approaches to architecture, like microservices, are making deployments faster. So developers can deploy small, isolated pieces of functionality versus the entire application. And that really helps identify those, bugs or issues faster so that you can deliver faster. These changes and others are what has really allowed these software teams to accelerate their development pace and speed. Now, be mindful that not all teams will be successful with all of these technologies. Not every new shiny thing works for every application or every team. The message here is just to not be shy about trying out new concepts, embracing them, figuring out, do they work well for your team? Embracing change means stepping outside of your comfort zone. There can be a lot of change to manage when you're talking about a whole team here, but developing that muscle to discover, validate, and embrace change has a profound impact on a team's ability to change priorities and speed up their development pipeline. They can really deliver more customer value faster. High-performing teams embrace change in order to best satisfy their customers. Strategy 2, cultivate collaboration. So our next strategy is all about work environments, and I don't mean the types of desks or chairs that surround you. I mean fostering a teamwork environment that cultivates a collaborative approach to development while minimizing distractions. A truly collaborative culture helps deliver quality software at speed. Fostering an environment that encourages, individuals to write the best code of their lives is an environment that high-performing teams want to create and do create. A lot of developers prefer writing software on their own, and we want to encourage these developers to do just that and to do what will make them successful. So some high-performing teams will lean deeply into things like pair programming, and other teams only selectively apply pair programming to complicated and important tasks only. You also want to enable that distributed environment, to support developers working on their own, writing software at their own pace, where they follow their own schedule. Maybe they code in the evening, or maybe they code in the morning. You just want to be flexible and, observe what works well for your engineers. High-performing teams not only have the environment to support writing great software, but they also encourage, a disciplined culture of reviewing everything that is written to ensure that quality happens. It's really fundamental that teams keep those communication channels around coding changes and other changes to be open. They keep those channels open. Changes to code cannot be seen as like sacred, nor beyond review or intelligent debate. Like, we want a debate to happen around our code changes because that's going to improve that code quality. The highest performing teams, don't forget that their teams extend beyond the development team. They engage their marketing colleagues, their IT colleagues, technical support stakeholders throughout the entire software development process. This really brings a multidisciplinary perspective, into that development process, and it helps round out feature development and bug resolution. Breaking down those immediate silos is really the first step towards building a company-wide support system and the first step towards generating a more collaborative and innovative culture. Lastly, again, you want to be open. Collaborative cultures really flourish when high-performing teams share their successes and projects company-wide. So that's beyond the core software development team. So for example, they share both their wins, their fails, their roadmaps to help build that broader organizational understanding of the significant projects that are happening. Simple practices like these build organizational understanding and it increases focus, across otherwise disparate stakeholders. So everyone knows what's going on. Everyone has a stake in what's happening. High-performing teams systemically share and collaborate. At the same time, a collaborative culture also requires discipline. Having open communication and awareness is key, but when there's too much noise entering the equation, it really can become overwhelming. So minimizing distractions really becomes increasingly important. There's too many emails, too many pages to read, too much information flowing through the office. It can be really hard to stay above all that noise and minimize those disruptions. Implementing simple rules that can help this are things like, when someone's wearing headphones, don't bother them. So it's like small things you can do to make this easier. High-performing teams also implement workflow strategies and tooling to stay above that noise. So they only switch their attention when someone is directly asking for it or mentioning them. They watch only the documents that apply to them and their day-to-day work. Most importantly, they minimize context switching by staying in tools where most of their time is spent. Moving on to strategy 3, balance autonomy and visibility. Now, what Atlassian has learned from thousands of enterprise organizations about their journey is that not all teams are alike. The next strategy is all about helping teams strike a balance between autonomy and visibility, helping developers work the way that makes them most productive while giving stakeholders the information they need when they need it, with as little friction as possible. Software teams want to work the way that makes them the most productive. They need the flexibility to switch between tools, implement new coding practices, and customize their development management processes. Teams really crave freedom and flexibility to work the way they want. Some teams practice Agile, Scrum, or Kanban, but others practice Waterfall. But what they all crave is that freedom to do and work the way they please. So having that foundation to select the technologies and workflows and tooling really helps them become more efficient, and it drives efficiency. So this does require that they use tools that works for their specific processes and workflows. Tools that are flexible, customizable, and extensible so that they're easy to use and adapt to. So as many of you know, the legacy systems that you've used in the past or using today, they can be a little bit more inflexible and they're a little outdated in today's standards. So these software teams today want to test and experiment with new systems, which is really great, but it can often lead to various teams using many different tools, disparate systems, making it very hard to stay on top of what's happening or stay connected with each other. All of that freedom really can come at a price, and that's usually at the price of visibility. Stakeholders like team leads, management, release managers, they all need a way to stay on top of the progress. This is really especially the case for large companies where tracking progress across teams can be very difficult. With information in all of those different tools, it can be hard for those at the center to see what's going on. Alignment can be very hard, but it's really critical. Key people in the development process need that end-to-end visibility without limiting the autonomy of those teams. And to do this, they require several things. A unified view of what the teams are doing and how they're doing it, contextual traceability from each stage of the process. They really want that centralized information. This often means structure and consistency in applications and processes, which limits what we talked about earlier, autonomy. Similar to cultivating collaboration, striking a balance between that minimizing distraction while boosting collaboration, this is very similar. So high-performing teams, they have found a way to strike that balance between autonomy and visibility. They give that end-to-end traceability while giving software teams the ability to choose how they want to work. Most enterprise companies actually struggle with finding this balance between autonomy and freedom, which is what teams want, and that end-to-end traceability, which is what management wants. So this really is sort of like the enterprise dilemma, is having to choose between autonomy or visibility. It can really become a battle, like a battle of standardization of the enterprise. So you must have a balance of both of these things in order to be successful, which requires making them a frictionless, integrated experience, and high-performing teams have done just that. So to review, going back full circle, back to our strategies to overcome typical software team challenges, we squash communication issues by fostering a collaborative environment and minimizing noise. We manage dependencies with modern practices and technologies. We select tooling that empowers your team to work the way they want while giving stakeholders the visibility they crave. Now, by now you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but I can't just snap my fingers and make this all happen overnight. And you would be correct. It can be really tough to do this. Tough to implement one of these strategies, let alone all of them at once. That being said, there is good news here. It can be made easier, and it can be done through software. And that's where Atlassian tools come into play.